Hello and very welcome at the second day of the conference on street art Periphery at the Ljubljana International Street Art Festival. The second day of the conference we will start a little differently than it was set before in our timetables. So the first one to introduce her paper will be Susan Hansen. You already met her yesterday while she was telling us about the new art journal, the new issue of it, which you can also, if you missed it in the print copy, you can also see it online. Well, let me introduce her, since I promised you yesterday. She's chair of the Visual and Creative Method Group at Middlesex University in London. She's interested in graffiti and street art's existence within a field of social interaction as a form of conversation on urban walls that are constantly changing. She is editor of New Art Journal, co-editor of Visual Studies, and vice president of the International Visual Sociology Association. Her paper is called The Role of Street Art in Sustainable Development, Art and Social Change, and she will consider the role that may be played by street art in building people's awareness of key sustainability issues. So let us welcome Susan Hansen.
Thank you for using the long version of my bio. It sounds quite cool when you write it down, but I'm not that cool in person. Okay, so I am not Pedro Suarez Neves. He will be joining us a little later to talk about Lisbon, which I'm super excited about going to next week. So I'm going to give my paper a little bit early. This paper is the product of one of my many lockdown projects. I don't know about the rest of you, but I just threw myself into as many things as I could because I was stuck in the kitchen in a onesie with my cat. Which kind of sucked, but I'm very happy to be back on the road again now. So this started as a small project. It turned into a 40,000-word report and is now on its way to becoming a book manuscript for Palgrave Editions. This is my first attempt to present this research. I'm a little freaked out by the 15-minute limit, but I will try to stick to it. So the project's funded by Lavazza, I should acknowledge, and they wanted a critical evidence-based framework for their 4-year Towards 2030 What Are You Doing initiative, which is a project that harnesses street art to address the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So I did not really know what these were in any detail. The reason they wanted me to write this report and do this research is because of my expertise in street art and graffiti and urban creativity, and also my interest in kind of social justice and particularly gender and LGBT plus rights. But I didn't know that much about sustainability. These are the Sustainable Development Goals developed by the United Nations. They are laudable. I mean, they look great, right? So this is what we're supposed to try to achieve by 2030. So things like zero hunger and no poverty and decent work and economic growth, peace, justice, and strong institutions. So that, you know, that there are things that we should agree that we can work towards, but they're also flawed. Yeah. So what I really didn't want to sell out in writing this report, so I did do a fairly critical take on these goals. One of the omissions, so while we have gender equality, for example, which is great, there is no mention of sexuality at all in the goals. So there are problems with this, and I think street art is a genre where we tend to be more critical than most, where there's a degree of grassroots activism. So in kind of presenting a roadmap for street artists and allied practitioners to engage with the Sustainable Development Goals, I wanted to kind of point to some of the flaws within the system that we could address through our work. So, as originally conceived, the UN Sustainable Development Goals are anchored in these 3 pillars. Yeah? So these are economic welfare, environmental quality, and social coherence. Some people are very critical of this model and argue that it doesn't offer us a complete and coherent picture of the goals that we should have. They also argue that, you know, in practice, this does tend to prioritise economic goals over social and environmental goals, and we all know that pursuing economic goals often leads to negative consequences for people and the environment. Yeah, so To address these concerns, art culture has been proposed as a kind of a missing pillar. Yeah? So this is a concept that may strengthen this model by connecting and rebalancing the three established pillars of sustainability. So, I feel like I'm teaching you right now. I had to learn all this stuff. In the report, I argue that street art's responsiveness to site specificity and to both global and local concerns make it particularly well suited to the adaptation of the Sustainable Development Goals to divergent cultural contexts. Yeah? So this is a process that within the SDG land is known as cultural localisation. It's something that they regard as particularly important in translating this kind of universal language of these 17 global goals into forms that will resonate with people living in radically different cities, towns and regions across the world. So in the 11 minutes remaining, I want to briefly explore the potential role of street art in making a meaningful contribution towards the UN's SDGs via a series of case studies of existing street art initiatives that demonstrate the alignment of this form of art with the 17 SDGs and with the 5 Ps. These are the 5 Ps of the UN agenda, sorry, slightly pixelated, which are people or social concerns, planet or environmental concerns, prosperity, so this relates to cities and economies, peace, super important before anything else, and partnerships through which we need to work to accomplish anything. Right, on to the topic at hand. As we all know, since at least the early noughties, street art has been enthusiastically adopted by city planners and local governments seeking to develop local environments and bring culture to communities. Indeed, street art is now a ubiquitous feature of many contemporary cities, and there are hundreds of mural-based street art festivals held internationally, including this one. Cities and governments increasingly approach street art as a means to bring cities to life and as a strategy for revitalising civic engagement and a sense of belonging in urban environments. Following Florida's controversial but still influential creative cities model, cultural planning and the mobilisation of creativity is now regarded as integral to cities' competitive economic performance. But there are critics of this model. Cameron McAuliffe is one of the big critics. He's argued that attempts to harness street art as a form of creativity have often been grounded in a pervading kind of sense of loss of community in urban environments, that we've somehow lost something and that street art could reconnect us and help us find this lost community. He argues that in practice, this longing for lost forms of community has often been aligned with a desire for greater social order and a clean and orderly city. And we know that clean and orderly cities tend to position graffiti as a threat to the cleanliness and order of the city. Yeah? So we need to approach this model with caution, even if we're running festivals. Yeah? And they need to be critical, like this one. So critics charge that creative city approaches instrumentalise culture and the arts in the regeneration and development of urban environments and in the symbolic representation of cities as dynamic and creative. Some go as far as to argue that street art itself contributes to the process of gentrification and displacement by acting as symbols that investors perceive as heralding an area's readiness for development. Yeah, because once we get graffiti and then we get some nice murals, then maybe, the hipsters are going to want to move in which process artists living in the area and other local residents are often eventually forced to relocate as rising rents in creative districts transform places of artistic production into areas where art on the streets is consumed by new upwardly mobile residential communities. I know we know all this, but we need to remember all this in our work. So this brings us to the first case study. Street art practitioners are often critically responsive to and very much aware of the social, economic and environmental issues raised by the process of gentrification and displacement. Indeed, gentrification is a commonly recurring meta-theme referenced by artists in their work. So, people are very much aware of the potential impacts of their work on the city and the residents. Over the last decade, London-based artist Ada Wilde has organised a series of anti-gentrification art takeovers and artist-led initiatives in Hackney Wick, which is close to where I live. In 2016, she curated a takeover of the iconic yet derelict Lord Napier building. There used to be loads of raves and stuff in there in the noughties. And this featured a lot of Hackney Wick's internationally renowned street artists. Yeah, you can see the figure on the left is 2016, and on the right is 2021. In 2016, the top of the building, Edwin painted shithouse to penthouse, pardon my French. which was quite prescient because, 5 years later, there is a penthouse rising up in the background in this image. And it's now been transformed into a pub, and all of this has been erased. Street art is a critically reflexive genre that operates in some sense as a barometer of community concerns with social, economic and environmental issues. Without us trying to create projects that address these issues, this is a form of art that often involves activism and an awareness of these concerns. It's also often characterised as a form of art that empowers people to assert their right to freedom of expression and their right to the city itself. Such claims position street art as a creative form of resistance that questions and critiques the environment, challenges inequalities and offers new visions for social, political and environmental futures. Street artists and activists Bill Posters encapsulates this perspective in describing street art as a weapon in the struggle against oppression, social and environmental injustice and conformity, and as a form of art that manifests creative forms of resistance to multiple threats. And this kind of rhetoric is echoed in more formal spheres. So in their discussion of the role of culture in Sustainable Development Goal 16, Peace, Justice and Strong Institutions, the British Council notes the capacity of the arts to facilitate social change by highlighting oppression and injustice, and that the protection of the right to freedom of expression is fundamental to this goal. I'm going to skip forward or I'm going to run out of time. To another case study. Okay, so we all know that street art is often used as an organic and peaceful means of resistance, especially when other forms of communication are not possible. And I'm thinking of Anton's presentation yesterday on the street art in Moscow. During the Arab Spring pro-democracy uprising, street artist Bahia Shahab began spray painting the walls of Cairo to mark the widespread community outrage at the oppressive and violent actions of the authorities. She researched 1,000 different ways of depicting the Arabic word for no and painted messages such as no to military rule, no to violence and no to dictatorship on the walls of the city. Notably, Bahia's creative acts of resistance had both a local and an international impact, and prior to this moment in time, Bahia was a university professor. She did not identify as a street artist. This was her mode of expressing outrage as part of a collective expression of outrage on the streets of Cairo at the time. So it's a self-initiated creative response to local and regional political circumstances. Herein lies one of the strengths often claimed for street art as a democratic and accessible art form. So it's argued to be democratic and accessible for two main reasons. Firstly, in order to view it, citizens need not visit cultural institutions, which in many cases may be inaccessible to many, and not all of us feel comfortable in fancy museums and galleries. Secondly, street art is a form of everyday creativity that's inclusive and accessible, in theory. People do not need to identify as artists or to have any formal training in the arts to engage in forms of urban creativity. In theory, everyone can participate in conversations on urban walls, although in some cultural contexts, this form of cultural expression is not without considerable risk. Street art is also often claimed to have the capacity to engage communities in a more actful and mindful exploration of their environments. Alison Young has gone as far as to suggest that encountering street art can lead to a sense of enchantment or wonder, and it can arrest our habitual motion through the city and make us stop and think and feel and reflect in our automatic paths through our everyday lives. Peter Bankston has also argued that street art may provide a sense of community cohesion, belonging and connection that can inspire social action and enhance people's empathy with the plight of marginalised others. So these are impacts clearly relevant to Sustainable Goal 10, reduced inequalities, and a bunch of related goals. So we're already doing this stuff. Research also demonstrates that murals may have a public health impact at community level, with significant increases in collective efficacy, social cohesion and trust, and a reduction in experienced stigma for residents living within a mile of newly painted murals. So this stuff actually makes people feel better. This is in line with the evidence base in support of the positive impact of arts and cultural activities on well-being, health and mental health, which relates, I guess, to Sustainable Development Goal 3, which is about I feel ridiculous saying this, good health and well-being. Yeah, so we're hitting all this stuff already. This is a genre, an art form that already is attentive to the Sustainable Development Goals or the concerns expressed therein. Okay, nearly there. I have 3-4 minutes left. So, street art is a powerful agent of change as it's embedded in the everyday context of urban public space. And it's important to remember, as we were discussing yesterday, that this is a collective conversation and that walls are also an arena for social debate about issues that matter to us all. I won't go into this case study in detail because I've published it separately elsewhere, but this is a case study on the graffiti and street art produced in the lead up to the vote for marriage equality in Australia a few years ago, and looking at how this was an issue that was live on the streets, and attempts to kind of buff or paint bomb marriage equality murals were led with resistance from everyday citizens that really altered the visual landscape. Okay, so the final case study has an environmental focus. In 2018, artist Ernest Zakharievic collaborated with the Orangutan Information Centre and the Sumatran Orangutan Society to cut a giant SOS distress call into an oil palm plantation in Sumatra. So this is kind of a melding of street art and land art traditions, and I think there is a real resonance there. Ernest works together with a group of artists who usually work in urban public space, but this is very much, obviously a non-urban space. So he's in this work trying to expose the destruction of Indonesia's native forests and their associated ecosystems. Yeah, it's innovative in the scope of its aims. Yeah, so usually street artists don't tend to work with NGOs. They don't tend to, in this project he also planted trees. He built permaculture farms along with local schools and so on. Yeah, so it illustrates, kind of going beyond simple awareness, the capacity of art space interventions to serve as a bridge to encourage critical reflection and collaborative action on complex intersecting issues. In this case, the negative impact of economically positive agricultural development on the biodiversity of forests in Sumatra. Yeah? So Save Our Souls highlights the at times counterproductive relationship between environmental sustainability goals and socioeconomic goals. Yeah? This may in turn facilitate critical awareness of some of the inherent tensions and trade-offs between the SDGs, as in practice progress on one goal can be at the detriment of progress on another. And as I'm nearly out of time, I'm going to skip to the conclusion. As a culture that's long been engaged in grassroots creative activism for social justice and environmental goals, I think it's pretty clear, whoops, there we go, I'm working on 2 screens. It's pretty clear that street art is already making a meaningful contribution towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we're kind of already doing this. However, despite the clear relevance of street art to the SDGs, until recently very few street artists and allied creative practitioners appeared aware of, let alone employed, the language of the SDGs, and even fewer worked in active collaboration with a range of stakeholders, including local government and policymakers, NGOs and private companies, to amplify the impact and reach of their work. Indeed, perhaps the majority of street artists would likely not ordinarily conceive of the potential audiences for and impact of their work in this manner. Building street art culture's awareness of the complex issues raised by the SDGs, encouraging artists to rethink their existing practice through the lens of the SDGs, and developing creative networks to include a wider range of stakeholders seems likely to augment the capacity of street art to make a significant contribution towards progress on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. That's it. And this is the project that funded me, and I will talk about that one next time.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Now we will continue with a couple of Zoom lectures. Hopefully we will have Zoom online back again soon, because coming up next are Laura Luque Rodrigo and Carmen Moral Ruiz. First one holds PhD in art history, is a lecturer at the University of Jaén and coordinator of the Urban and Public Art Group of the JEIIC. Her line of research are related to urban art, art and gender, and education and art. The other, Carmen Moral Ruiz, holds PhD in history and the arts, is a restorer, lecturer at the University of Huelva, and a member of the Urban and Public Art Group of the GEIIC. They will talk about context art in margins, differences and similarities in urban art in a globalized world, specifically in Andalusia.
Well, you can see the.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, good morning. The following presentation, entitled "Context Art in the Margin: Difference and Similarities in Urban Art in a Globalized World," has been prepared by Laura Luque and myself, Carmen Moral. First of all, we would like to thank the organization for accepting this communication. And the main objective of this study is to analyze the concept of border and boundary art applied to urban art, focusing particularly on a territory that serves as a link between hemispheres, Andalusia, south of Spain. So I can. Well, Morris wrote that urbanism is a materialization of the different lifestyle in different societies, but urbanism also influences and conditions community life. The city of today has therefore promoted dehumanization by prioritizing monumentalism and in architecture over social relations, and Lefebvre defined the space in the capitalist city as being fragmented and hierarchical, favoring homogenization. Currently, the rapid growth of cities is one of the major concerns of the World Health Organization, and certain artistic movements have also addressed it. Some artistic trends change their creative approach from object to concept in the mid-20th century, but in the last decade, a new transition from concept to context has taken place. Artistic expression emerged from within the subversive artistic practice that took place in the street. On one side, graffiti explores the third landscape defined by Clement as the leftover spaces, neglected by urban planning that neither express power nor submission, but are anthropized and dehumanized. On the other side, urban art takes place in more or less visible space in the city, transforming them and exploring their quirks, textures, and neighborly relations. The boundaries of urban art have blurred with the emergence of post-muralism and digital street art. The concept of border art was used in an exhibition held in 1984 in Rome, Bologna, and Milan, where 18 New York graffiti artists exhibited their artwork. Art critic Francesca Alinovi takes this concept of border like something that not implies territorial limits, but also distinguishes between the boundaries that exist between the mainstream and the elitist and other ideas, and also includes the importance of skin color in the origins of New York graffiti. The philosopher Eugenio Trias does not understand the concept of boundary and something that's close. The boundary is not only what separates, as one tends to think, but it is also what joins the area marked out by the boundary itself with the area beyond the boundary. In this way, the boundary also serves as an intermediate space. The concept of boundary also has its artistic influence. For example, in 2020, the exhibition Lines in the South of Reason was held at the Andalusian Center for Contemporary Creation, located in Cordoba. This exhibition explored the boundaries of creativity and the use of public space based on trias concept. Furthermore, the idea of intermediate space also be linked to artistic expression in public space. Elena G. Gallo defines it as an imaginary space that allows for a frictionless relationship and from which the different influences on the artworks developed in the street can be analyzed, taking into account motivation, which defines the raison d'etre, the creative process, which lies between the idea and the motivation of each urban artworks, and finally, how long they are likely to last. That is to say, while graffiti continues to be considered border art in certain contexts, urban art is still considered to be that art that lays in the middle of ground. In any case, both move between the boundaries and are perceived in a broad and flowing manner. Well, that is to say, this artistic expression in public space, including commissioned street art murals, move between the boundaries of art and not art, public and private, culture and counterculture, elites and underground, institutional and anti-establishment, commercial and non-commercial, and permanence and the ephemeral. Likewise, in a globalized world, the real geopolitical borders also become blurred, just like the border between the street and cybernetics. In this sense, the concept of liminality arises, coined by the anthropologist Arnold van Gennep and later developed by Victor Turner. It defines, in simplified terms, a state of passage, of transition. The liminal metaphorically calls for a transition from one state to another, life and death, or the rite of passage to adulthood, the threshold being something that is no longer and something that is about to be. Once again, an intermediate space where intangible values are so highly dominant, and not surprisingly, both graffiti and urban art have strong intangible components. As for the boundaries or borders in the city where these artistic expressions are produced, architect Ana Cristina García Luna applied the classification criteria drawn by Leach for the city in terms of urban art, thus analyzing how it develops in paths, concluding that human skull was important, edges which fragment the city, and therefore, as he proposed, they use as a medium for urban art could become inclusive neighborhoods, nodes as strategic focal points and landmarks. The importance of context as part of the creation of urban art and the idea of boundary from a flowing point of view is evident once again. The concept of boundary is diverse, depending on the perspective, and is so characteristic of urban art. It's determined by the intention of the artistic or collective. In terms of borders, for artists, sometimes the concept of here and there are blurry, depending on how you look at them. In the case of Spain, and specifically Andalusia, here and there are complex and relative concept, given that they are places that receive migrants and at the same time have also experienced large influx of immigration at a certain time in their past and in more recent history. In the following, we will present a series of artists who are linked to the southern hemisphere and yet belong to the northern hemisphere, and vice versa, intertwining and blurring the boundaries between the two with artistic intention.
Boa Mistura is one of the best-known examples of a collective and of artists from the Northern Hemisphere that take their work to the Southern Hemisphere. Another example is the French artist J.R. with his artwork Women Are Heroes, located in different places in the Southern Hemisphere and which aim to give importance and visibility to women and their role in society. Isidro López Aparicio is another artist who seeks visibility and uses art as a means of recognizing, linking, in turn, the Northern and Southern Hemispheres. He aims to bring visibility to the situation of the Sahrawi people and their imprisonment. When Brazilian artist and activist Chermi Ferreira was asked in an interview for her opinion on whether she observes much difference between the artists who are there in Brazil and European artists who go, for example, to the favelas of Brasilandia, just to paint, she answered, when they come to Brazil to paint, they only know the touristic part, not the whole picture, which is not necessarily something negative because the people who live here in Brazil, especially in those areas, also want graffiti and urban art to make their area more beautiful. And we also have to show our good points, not only violence and problems. Another example of international artists for the Southern Hemisphere is Igor Marota. He works mainly seeks to evoke love. One of the festivals and events worth mentioning is the Cochabamba Urban Art Biennial, which began in 2011 with national and international artists trying to give new meaning to the city and its boundaries through different artistic expressions. In the African context, an example of this type of project and artistic collective is Wide Open Walls, which seeks to revive space through community art. Another example is the Anotaban Collective, which has created an artwork in Sudan that seeks to raise awareness on the street about the need to avoid instilling the language of weapons and violence in children for early age. However, where artivism is possibly most developed within urban art is in the terms of gender equality, with numerous examples which we do not have time to elaborate on. It is particularly interesting, given the concept of urban art, borders, and artivism, to explore the unique territory of Andalusia, that liminal place between Europe and Africa, and also between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, where several cultures developed at the same time. And already in contemporary time, it has been a place of emigrants and also a recipient of immigration. It is in this context what the artist Coche Tomé, a Guinean artist who has lived in Córdoba, Andalusia, since the age of 11, develops his work. His project speaks of equality, demonstrating the need to educate in values. He also discusses intersectionality, that is to say, he talks about the right equal by women, by LGBT collective, and that since they were equal very recently, they can still be lost. But he explains that if you are black, it is even more complicated. In conclusion, urban art takes on a different meaning depending on its context. In a globalized world, however, borders are becoming increasingly blurred and artists traveling back and forth are feeding the international essence. And in the case of artivism, they are helping provide greater visibility to local rebounds, which also helps to empower a region, regardless of whether it belongs to one hemisphere or the other, or if it is a big city or a more rural area. In Spain, for example, festivals are becoming particularly important in areas facing the population. Coche Tomé's artwork takes us to those geographical and political boundaries, to the boundaries of neighborhoods and graffiti, urban art, and commissioned street art murals, skin color, gender, creative, and discursive boundaries that we can sum up with a phrase from one of his artwork. I will wake up when art wakes up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for presenting your paper. Now we will continue with Einat Mendelssohn-Schwarz, PhD, town planner, architect, artist, currently working as a postdoctoral researcher in the Faculty of Architecture and Town Planning at the Technion, Israel. Israel Institute of Technology. She has been investigating murals and street art policy for the past 6 years. Her paper is titled "The Periphery of Street Art Policies, the Relationship Between Policy and Practice That Vary by City."
Yeah, sorry, got stuck. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about the periphery of mural policies and their relation to mural creation. So, okay, first of all, I want to give you my definition about murals. So we're talking the same when I'm talking about murals. I'm talking about anything which is painted or written directly on an external wall. Which means it can be created by artists who work with the government, with institutions. It can be created by people who are doing informal or illicit works. It can be part of muralism, street art, or graffiti culture. Just to make so we're all on the same page. And today we're going to talk about mural policies. So first of all, why do cities promote these policies? So murals are everywhere around the world, and they're very dominant and they're very visual. And as Susan was saying before, many cities around the world have been using murals to promote different strategies, agendas, urban renewal. So they're using murals as part of their policy. But on the other hand, murals incorporate many challenges and many contradictions that are challenging the same governing governments regarding their urban realms. So many cities are developing these policies. What exactly are they? So these policies are usually local policies, local initiatives that change between cities. They're a set of tools that, using them, local governments usually are attempting to govern, sometimes promote, sometimes manage murals to better suit how their vision of the public spaces are. All the while balancing different interests. For example, looking if they're looking at the artist's interest or the owner's interest, and trying to balance what they fit should be for this city. Sorry. Okay. Why are we talking about mural policies? We're talking about mural creation. First of all, throughout my research, we've seen again how the policies affect and are affected by mural creation. This can be a direct effect, such as when you're talking about murals who are created with consent through mechanisms of registration, funding, encouragement, promotion of projects. But this can be an indirect effect, which, for instance, we see that in the paper of Farrell and White about spot theory, when it talks about how artists choose their location of their works, and one of the factors is how long this work is going to stay. Is it going to be buffed? Is it going to be erased? Are the police going to be coming? Is it a hot spot? And these are things that the policy addresses. So by looking at how the policies address the space, we can see how many times how artists make decisions around where they're going to locate and what they're going to be creating there. If we're going to the planning realm, we see researchers like Ciaudelli and Morani, which have beautiful papers about how people react in light of the law, meaning that people don't have to obey the law to be affected by the law. One of their examples is that a person who goes and robs a shop wears a mask. It doesn't mean that he's obeying the law, but by the fact that he knows that what he's doing is illegal, he's wearing the mask and reacting to the law. And this we see that because the policies themselves are de facto saying what is legal and what is not, people and the mural creation in the city is reacting to this, and many times it actually is pushing back, and the policy is yet again reacting and changing because of the mural creation. So I wanted to talk to you about how the mural policies in cities are affecting the mural creation. And first of all, we wanted to look about what cities can actually do when controlling their public realm. Then I want to talk to what they can do, and then I want to talk to you about what they actually do. So first of all, we have the issue of boundaries. When we're looking at how mural policy, not every city has the ability to actually affect all of its cities. There are cities who do, and they have a policy which is relevant to every city, but when we look, but there are other cities that can only affect the city center or can only affect murals that are created on the public buildings, so people could do whatever they want on private buildings. So this is something that changes between cities. Secondly, we have the definition. Now, this sounds something very technical, but actually it's really not, because when we're looking at urban spaces, well, everything on urban spaces pretty much can be categorized into these 4 categories. It can be an architectural design, it can be a sign, an artwork, or it can be illicit. And in most cities that I've researched, we've seen that these 4 categories are usually regulated by different city codes, by different organizations in the institutions in the city. So pretty much if a work is defined as a sign or a mural, so an artist, it will be treated differently in the city. For example, if you're doing a mural of a beautiful dog over a pet shop, in some cities this will be a sign, in some cities this will be an artwork, and the city would react differently. We have levels of consent, which meaning, does the city actually have a design review mechanism, or does it, or do you just need to tell the city, I'm going to do a mural here, and they don't care what's going to be on the mural, or do they tolerate things that people just are making? And this sounds So this is another mechanism that changes between cities. And the last one is enforcement, which of course, what I'm talking about is not actually the enforcement on the street, looking at if today there was a cop or not, but we're talking about mechanisms that are governed and are dictated by the municipalities. So let's say if a city has a zero tolerance, or if a city decides that they're gonna do an area and give it create free walls, this affects how the city is working. But we were looking later at cities, and we wanted to see if a city, we understand that they cannot actually regulate and do everything, not every city, but if a city actually could control everything in their public realm, would they actually want to do that? So we looked and we understood that there's a big dilemma around this. First of all, I call it the Spider-Man and Elsa dilemma. First of all, you have Spider-Man that says, with great powers comes great responsibility, meaning that if a city wants to control the public realm, it has to take responsibility over it. It means it has to maintain it. It has to make decisions. If someone makes a controversial mural, the city is de facto saying that the city is taking responsibility over the content. So if there's like someone's doing I don't know, we were talking before about the gay community, if something doing this, and the city's it went a design review process, the city is de facto saying that we accept this specific view, which is great, but they have to take the responsibility, and sometimes they get sued. For example, I know that in Brooklyn right now, the city was sued by All Lives Matter organizations because they were promoting Black Lives Matter murals, and the people, some of the people there are suing the city, saying that you have no right to promote this. So the city needs to know that if they're taking control, if they have a high level of control, they do need to take responsibility over this. The other side is looking at ELSA and saying, let it go. When the city is not regulating areas, they need to know that they're going to have spontaneity, and which is something beautiful, but they need to know that sometimes there are going to be controversies, and sometimes there are going to be people who are buffing, and sometimes there are going to be people who are riffing with one another, and this is going to happen, and they need to take a breath and know that this is part of their public realms, and not every city wants to do this. So we were looking to see how cities are actually reacting in real life, and we looked at Portland in the beginning. The reason that we chose Portland without getting into the details is because in 1998, the city at one point decided that legally they're going to regulate and control the whole public realm, meaning that murals and signage are going to be regulated equally and in a very harsh form. So everything needs to be approved by the city. And what we see that through the years, the city has taken the control level down over cities, deciding that actually there are going to be areas where people can register murals and not have the mural content analyzed and then reviewed. Sorry, there are areas which they're going to say, we don't really care. And the big thing that they did 10 years ago is decided that if nobody is ringing and reporting graffiti works, it's probably okay, and it's not actually, people are not getting angry. And then you have areas who have evolved with much more organic because, you have a very street art community there, and the city is letting down the control. And as a result, you have what you sometimes call an acupuncture policy, which means that it's not that the city has decided that there are specific areas which is going to have high level of control, and there's areas that are just going to, see how things work out and, and ad hoc react to them. Now, we were looking at another city, which is Tel Aviv in Israel, which does not have a very high level of control, but seeing if they have the same effect about doing, deciding on specific areas, and we saw that yes. The southern side of the city there, the municipality is actively saying that we like street art there to go organically. We don't want to control it. There are areas which the city has de facto let people do pretty much whatever they want unless it's offensive. But then there's a specific line. And this is not an official policy, but de facto the people are saying, if you do a mural above this place, we're going to buff it. It's really nice that we have murals in all the city, but this enough is enough. This is the line. Above this border, the rules change. And so what's interesting is, and why are we talking about this? Because actually the areas where the policy has created its own peripheries, where it is letting go the regulations, letting go the controls, actually where we see the street art shining, we see the graffiti growing, we see many aspects which, you look at a city and you're walking around and you can actually visually see how the policy is affecting the mural creation. And it doesn't mean that the street art is not going to be in the other areas. It's just going to be that it's harder to create the street art in the other areas. And how the legal aspects and the geography aspects of the city are combining into one. And thank you. And if you have questions, I'll be really happy to answer them. Thank you. Oh, and I think Edward's here. Sorry.
Thank you, Einat. And now we will continue with the lecture that should be first according to our schedule, but we are gonna see it and hear it now. It is the Pedro Soares Neves' lecture. He's a designer and consultant for numerous city councils and nationwide public and private institutions in their approach to informal visual science production methodology focused on the role of the user in the design process. He is also experienced practitioner and academic, organizer of the annual Lisbon Conference and scientific journals. So with his lecture, we begin this panel titled Ambiguous Street Art Between Center and Periphery. He came to talk about Urban Creativity, Lisbon Activities 2022.
Hello. Do you have me? Is it the sound? Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. Sorry for the delay. I've changed houses here, and so on. The internet and stuff, it was kind of complex. So first of all, I thank Sandy for inviting me. It was in Lisbon not so long ago, and we had an interesting talk. And also, there's this interesting dates coincidence. This conference of yours in these dates, it's like 1 week before the conference I'm organizing in Lisbon. So beside the normal work, this is usually very hectic times for me, because I'm also organizing the conferences and everything. So, and the challenge Sandy proposed me was to also, or to try to explain a bit the rationale behind the conference, our conference topic for this year, and also try to merge a bit the topics from your conference and my conference, and try to talk a little bit about it. I will try to show here some images. Just let me put this. So the conference I'm organizing, it's going since 2014, and we are running it. So it's the 9th edition this year. Just okay, this one I think. Here. I think I'm sharing. So, and this is the conference. It's called Urban Creativity, and we actually, in this edition, the thematic, it's liminal, and the origin for this name, it's on the explanation of the name itself, and it goes to the meaning of the word, and we wanted to stress the moment in the world today, right? Like this very tensioned and not defined stage, and the word means precisely this: the transition. We are like in the middle of a transition phase. Then, thinking a little bit more in this concept, I've understood that this is a bit a condition of postmodernity. We are always in transition. We are always not in a definitive stage. We are always in this kind of in-between stages. But the speed of this in-betweenness, it's always very permuting, right? And this comes in the aftermath of COVID, of course, at least the biggest wave of it. And also, of course, the escalade of the war and everything. And usually, because I try to think on these things in the end of the year, like for this event that will occur next week, I was thinking on it in the end of 2021, and we never know what will happen in between this month before the ideas and the making of the conference. The ambiguity of the title, it's always relevant, and also because it gives space for more people to submit and to give their own contributions on their research perspective. I will now talk a bit about the origin of the conference itself and the initiative. Also because I need to explain a bit the main drive of it. Myself, I'm a researcher, and I've done, in the presentation, I've done some research on the subject. I've done my PhD on the subject. I've done also in the past, a more remote past, in the 90s, I was myself a practitioner. I was doing some graffiti, and then later we can say street art, and so this was very impactful in my life, and as in parallel to a design formative direction, and this relation both of practice and theory marked me a lot, and the conference was a result of this. It was a consequence of this, and start gathering people with the same profile I had, or I have, was natural for me, and I started inviting them with a partner in 2014 to come for Lisbon and to talk about this concept that was urban creativity. The name itself, it was a bit an attempt to escape the art word, because usually there are many preconceptions around the art word that can go from one extreme, like the high art, very like godlike thing, like inspired and very only for some, and something like this. And you can have like the usage of the art word that comes from the bottom up, right? Like you can do everything with art. If you are a good craftsman, or if you are a good doing a meal, you've done that meal with art, right? And you not need to be necessarily professional on it. You just did it with art, right? So, but because of this spectrum of art usages, or art usage for the usage of the name of art, I try to escape this, and that's why creativity entered the field. At the time, there was a dynamic about urban art and everything. And here in Lisbon, I was also responsible for building a relationship with the city council that became called Urban Art Gallery, and it's still running. This in 2008. And all this dynamic was natural and started in 2014 regarding the conference. And it was really interesting because it gathered immediately lots of people, and lots of angles gathered around this subject of graffiti and street art, from art history to geography and architecture, urbanism, law, everything. And it was really interesting since the beginning, and the trajectory is a bit reflected here on the site, and there are some numbers. This was the first one. It was not very visual. The second one started to appear some images. Already Lachlan was showing some stuff from Instagram, and that in the end became a book. Then more visits and travels and people from many places, inclusive United States, Germany, so on. They become flocking to the conference, and many of them are also in this conference of yours. And there's this kind of compactation of capacity as a network, and it's very interesting to observe. We in parallel, since the first edition, we published a book, and since 2015 until 2021, now we've started to publish journals, and as regular publications. And this was a new challenge, and it's the challenge where I'm placing more energy, actually, and not so much the conference, because the publications have all year dynamic, and they in the end are very much related with the initial purpose that I had to the objective of the conference, because my first and my mission in this stuff, for myself at least, is to give recognition to the studies that go around this subject of street art and graffiti. Of course, street art and graffiti already entered in many ways in the world of art, let's say, but as a tool for society, they can be much more than just a branch of contemporary art. And from this vision, from my personal vision to this, I really think that the research is paramount on this, and the quality of research and the quantity of research is very relevant to make this difference and to incorporate the visions upon street art and graffiti in a different way in society. And the journals are doing this trajectory. They are growing each year. It started one journal, the Street Art and Urban Creativity, and also because I've wanted to open a bit, not only to be around the same cluster of network and to open to other disciplinary perspectives, I started to multiply the journals and to include other perspectives more related with design and with drawing itself and architecture and public art as an area. It has its own dynamics also. So trying to reach other people that are thinking in parallel ways to street art and graffiti, and to somehow generate discussion. And this was since 2000, let's say 19 and 20, we got the 5 journals we have today. I can show you also, I'm not showing this exhaustively because this is accessible online, and you can visit it. And this is just a way to also illustrate a bit my talk. I don't know how much minutes I have, but I can show you here also the journals page. So if the journals have a specific dynamic, as I told you, and let's say the investment from myself to it, it's increasing every year. Must because as a a way to sustain the activity, it is much more visible, this sustainability. I do not have any support. In the past I had, and this year I have a little bit. I will talk about that a little bit, but I do not have a sustained support from any institution, both city council or university. Or the only sustained support I had until now, it's they give me the auditorium of the Faculty of Fine Arts. This is the only certainty I have. And even in the past 2 editions, it was not necessary because I did it 100% remote. And because of this, I've the bet on the journals. It's really relevant because it's the only way I can predict that can be sustainability source of income. Because of contracts with universities and faculties and libraries and so on, there's a way that this can be sustainable, and I'm trying to make this way. So, in a nutshell, the journals are these ones: are street art, and then user experience and public art journal, and these are the newest: the Black Book, drawing and sketching, and architecture, image studies, and they have their own really interesting dynamics. For instance, this one, I think you know the Peter Bankson. He was in last year in your conference, and I don't know if he is also this year. I didn't look at the program carefully, but is pretty much involved in this. In the previous edition of the journal, he was the co-editor of the publication. And this is the flagship publication for the topic, and in terms of recognition, it's pretty well positioned for academic terms. It is on the first quartile of the journals on this area for Scopus, and actually, it's a journal. It's a normal journal. You can access it. So open access, of course, and it has this logic. And for instance, these ones are the most read articles, and you can have access directly here. And you have the abstract and then the full text here. You can analyze every article and go deep on the subject of each author. So I'm not certain about the number of articles at this moment, but for instance, this one, street art and the urban creativity, we are on volume 7, so it's 14 numbers here, and they go back this 2015, and then you have the other journals. They are more recent. These two are more recent. UX, it's since 2019. So you have 3 volumes now, and Public Art Journal, it's the same. It's also 3 volumes. These 2 are more recent, and they are. I'm trying. Just a note, these are also printed. You can order them printed if you would like some bookshops and stuff they prefer, or libraries, they usually ask for these in paper versions, but these 2, they are only online, so they're very new. They started in 2020, but they nevertheless they are very interesting in terms of what became out of them, because the request was very visual, and so the contributions are very visual. They have very much rational, of course, because they are academic publications, but they are exploratory in terms of image, and it's very interesting to observe these other dynamics. Going back to the conference. Just to say that this conference this year have some activities that are running in parallel. One of the activities was I've been contacted by the guys of Meeting of Styles, and I've managed to organize with the City Council this warm-up event. Because why warm-up is only because of, again, budget. The City Council, I've tried to get some support from the City Council. Actually, the event will start next week, and we still do. They say yes, and they gave us some positive signs, but it's really hard to have the budget on the bank account. So in the end, it's a warm-up because it's running by just very, very few budget that the structure of the conference still have to make this happen. And anyway, I hope that it will be interesting because it's going to be in a interesting spot. That's a tramway that very it's more like an elevator way that have some panels, and it have been the place where these City Council have decided to start this dynamic of conversation with the street art and graffiti in Lisbon. And since 2008, it's been painted continuously, sometimes with stuff being organized there, but most of the time with a spontaneous dynamic. And it's very central, and it's very close to the faculty where the conference will run. So it's a very cozy place to do something in parallel. So this year, because it's kind of celebrating the back to physical, this partnership is happening, and that's it for this parallel thing. In general, this is the idea. In terms of I have a very particular personal approach to the subject of street art and graffiti in what concerns the purpose and the meaning. As I told you already, my main goal is to find other ways, not only by the I-heart relation, like the art market or the art world relation that's becoming very common with street art and graffiti artists. Not only this direction of integration with society, that's necessary, of course, and it's a driver, but try to find other ways to integrate the motivations, the knowledge that's being produced, and the values that exist within the attitude of people that decide to propose some stuff on the street. And this driver, it's very made me some U-turns on relations with administrations and so on. I'm seeing you. Tell me. It's my time. It's for conclusion. Okay, great. Thank you for appearing there. So just conclude say that this relation ends as a resistance process. I've been very happy with the trajectory, but make me to be doing this as a personal and always very non-sustained way, and at the same time with a big dimensional freedom to do it. So I do not have any compromise in any institution, but in the end, it's also a very precarious way to sustain the thing. And so I thank you, you all that are around this subject and invite me to be here. And this is part of the motivation also to belong to this big group of people interested in the same topics and so on. So keep it going and make me part of it and make it visible. And thank you. Thank you for having me. Sorry, I don't know if the connection is still running smoothly, but it's yours.
Much. Can you just stop sharing your screen, please? That would be okay. Thank you very much. So before we begin with the screening of the documentary film Street Heroines, I'm wondering whether maybe any of you have some questions for our guests. We had quite some of them. We had Susan Hansen, we had Lara Luque Rodrigo and Carmen Moral Ruiz. Now Pedro and Einat Mendelssohn Schwartz, they're all still here with us. Maybe you have some questions for them?
Okay, I'll start. I'll take this privilege to thank once again all five presenters to today's panel. I wanted just to reiterate what was being said, so in the sense of the complementary of the conferences and various initiatives. This is great to hear, like also how some initiative, such as in Lisbon, developed, and then Susan in the sense of the really focused analysis on certain topics, and for me it was again like this panel kind of encapsulated also the complementarity of also the topics. So I'm really looking forward then in the name of also the steering committee, and that we'll be able to work together on these two concepts and trying to merge them under the umbrella term of street art, because I think this panel in one way or another demonstrated how these various fields where street art intervenes are then transforming, changing, are being incorporated, especially like, for example, the aim of street art, and then especially on the topic of muralism. So I don't have any particular questions, as general, as I said, comment.
I hope you heard Sandy, because probably on Zoom, oops, what did I do? On Zoom, you probably don't hear it that well. Maybe someone with a question here as well? No. If we don't have questions, do we have time for more questions, Sandy? Okay. Since I guess it's too early for questions now, I would like to thank you all for your presentations. We're going to have a short pause for about 5 minutes just to prepare for the screening that won't be streamed. So if you are 5 minutes away from Kino Šiška, you can still come to see it live. Okay. Thank you, Mato. So you're all welcome to come here to Kino Šiška. We will continue in 5 minutes with the screening of documentary film Street Heroines. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
was in the making actually for several years, right? Would you mind telling us more about it?
Yeah, sure. I first want to say thank you to Sandy and to everyone who's made the Ljubljana Street Art Festival possible, and thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It's been fantastic these past couple of days to hear from all of the panelists and hear the passion that everyone has for exploring the impact of graffiti and street art here and just around the world. So yeah, to talk about street heroines, it's been a passion project of mine that I started in 2012, and it became much bigger than I ever thought it would be. I was actually out taking street photography or photographs in Queens, New York at the 5 Points building, which was featured a little bit in the film. It doesn't exist anymore due to gentrification. They tore it down, but I used to go there to see what was happening, what artists were around, what new pieces were up. And I was there one day and I saw something I'd never seen before, which was two women painting a piece together, an aerosol piece. They're using spray paint. And so it kind of stopped me in my tracks, and I wanted to understand more and how they got there and what they were doing. And then I also just realized that had been so ignorant up into that point in my life where I never considered the female experience in street art and graffiti, aside from, myself being a fan and wanting to document it. So I had a conversation with them. It turned out one was from the Bronx and one of the artists was from Barcelona, and they had met through Facebook, through common friends in the graffiti world, and they linked up to go paint. And so that was the first time that day they met. That was the first time I met them that day. And so it just became this real aha moment, like something's going on here and I want to know more about it. And so, yeah, like I said, that was 10 years ago. I started to do a photography project of challenge myself to go and find more female artists and document them. But eventually I decided to use my camera as a video camera and start interviewing them because they were open to it as I spent more time with them. And I just thought it would be a great way to hear directly from the artist about what they were doing. And I realized that as important as it is to see a finished piece, I think it's even more important to understand what motivated them to take that first act to go out into the street, which I feel is a very political act, to just be present and painting something where you might be allowed to paint or might not be. And then coupled with being a woman who we already have a lot of, burden in society. So I started to do short films, and then eventually I decided this needs to be a full-length documentary because there was very little written and documented about their experience.
You mentioned, and we also saw in the movie, that you met graffiti artists from basically all over the world. What are the common obstacles that female graffiti artists struggle with in this still male-dominated world? Sure.
I'd also like to say there are a lot of artists that I met that are not in the film, that I interviewed or I connected with. You hear the distinction a lot between graffiti artists and street artists. So this is a majority street artist sort of representation. But again, a lot of these women are grounded in graffiti or were inspired by graffiti. So I think the challenges still exist of people who work in the underground wanting to, be recognized. So keeping their identity low profile is one. There's an artist in Los Angeles who I spent some time with who paints trains, who, bombs the side of highways, underpasses. And Los Angeles is like kind of a different beast. And I spent days with her, and then eventually she just decided that she just was not comfortable with letting me use any of the footage or her interview because she has a lot of problems with the police. So, I'm not going to say that the differences, like once you're in the community, are much defined by your gender. But I think in general, what a lot of the women were saying is that, in the art world and in the world at large, we do struggle to still gain respect and equality. And, just with, I think getting the opportunities, and being invited or being recognized to
to go and participate in some sort of art experience. So I think that's a universal thing that a lot of women still face. And when I look at it from, who we might know as household names in the graffiti and street art world, and the rock stars and the Banksies and Shepard Fairys and the Ozemios and Cobras of the world, like, women still don't enter that conversation. So hopefully, projects like this can give these women more, visibility and to be mentioned within those rock stars of the street art world.
Yeah. Actually, you kind of replied to my next question already, but anyway, what are some shared concerns these women that you met, like what are those shared concerns they share among each other?
I think you probably noticed, or can point out too, the three protagonists we follow are certainly in different moments of their career trajectory as artists. So we kind of have Two Fly, who has already sort of paid her dues, and now she's like developing big festivals and creating more opportunities for women. We have Fusca, who was shy to show her face fully, and now she's more, out there and putting a face to her work. And she's actually, like she mentioned in the film, doesn't want to do street art for the rest of her life. It's just a phase, and now she's working more on sculptures and her fine art. And then you have Magrela in Sao Paulo, who I did spend a lot of time with. We became very close over the past 10 years. And she, from the beginning, was very, I would say, innocent in terms of like, what is a struggle to, be a female artist? But as she moved through the world and was trying to break more barriers, she realized that all of a sudden her gender is becoming this obstacle. And so she's much more radical, and I think you can kind of get that vibe from her story. And she's in a moment where she knows, like, living in a place like Brazil, like, her art is her battle cry. Like, she has to do it to express herself, get out her frustrations, but also to, represent the women around her who are still like stuck in this world where, women, kitchen, kids, and that's pretty much it, aren't empowered to have different opportunities in society. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
sure. We also like to hear often that future is female, right? And I would like to know, what are your thoughts on that? We are,
I don't know. I mean, that's a great slogan, but again, just with what happened in the United States in the past couple of weeks with the regression and overturning of the Roe versus Wade for having access to abortion, having the right to have an abortion at the federal level in the United States, it just seems like, I don't know. I mean, even in the film, Lady Pink mentions, like, whoa, Ecuador, they're like, 50 years, 80 years, what was going on in the United States. But now I'm like, are they really? Because I think we just, like, turned back the clock a bit. So I feel like, sure, the future is female. The future is just like, promotion of equality. I don't know. I feel like we're in such a weird place in the world right now. And I would like to also say that, if there's more female representation in politics, that possibly we can have more equality and better opportunities and better pay and childcare and all those things that are related to not just like working in, being represented in the underground subculture of graffiti and street art. But I do feel like artists are activists, and they, can spread that message more.
You mentioned, activism. And not long ago, actually, you also mentioned that this movie is basically one of the tools for a change. Is there anything that women can do to fight this restrictive system that dominates our society? You mentioned earlier what's happening in the US.
Yeah, it's hard to muster up the strength to go forward when governments change laws overnight that have been in place for so long, and when generations have been born into a free society, so they think and now have to, rethink what it means to to be a woman, or you know, the women in your life who want to have freedom to choose what they do to their bodies. I think that I'm not sure, I don't have the answer to that, but I for sure feel like showing this film to more people, whether you agree with it or you don't, or maybe you find a new perspective on the power of art. I do think art is, it's in power of street art is, you know, we can bring it back to that. That's what the conference is about. And I think that to echo what Swoon was saying is that, you know, when art shows up in unexpected places, it can have a big impact on people who might not have considered contemplating art because it exists in big institutions or elite, you know, museums, and, you know, there's money involved to go and see it and experience it. So I think that street art is, you know, and graffiti too, because graffiti obviously represents like the invisible voices of the peripheries and people struggling. So I do think art can, you know, whatever it's the beautification of communities or also just getting communities together to support some sort of messaging at a grassroots level, that can be, you know, the area where change can generate.
Here comes a thought, like, okay, you are giving a voice to female graffiti and street artists. What was when you were showing your movie around the globe, what was the feedback of male graffiti and street artists?
I don't know. I mean, a lot of people have enjoyed it, you know, for different reasons. Some people really like the music, and some people love seeing New York City and Sao Paulo and just sort of like the cinematography. I'm not sure. I haven't had in-depth conversations, so if anybody wants to talk about that afterwards, give me their opinion. I'm all ears. I did make a really conscious decision. I did interview male artists to have the material, but I think, you know, in the edit room, I had one cut that I showed at the Smithsonian American Museum of Art a few years ago, and we had some interviews with guys in there, and I think that it just felt out of place because this is one of two, you know, documentaries that exist in that feature female artists, the other one being Girl Power. I haven't seen it, but I maybe some of you have. I just thought it was important to really give this platform to women, to let them speak. Let's like show their badass talent. And then also it was behind the camera too. I tried to make a pretty all-female team of the core crew that went to shoot it, that edited it, that the music mostly is made by female up-and-coming musicians and artists. And so I guess it was just sort of that theme, like if we're going to go all out, like let's just make this, because we're proving ourselves as filmmakers too, that we can actually put something together. Because I work in a world that's very dominated in Hollywood by men, and there aren't that many opportunities. So, you know, being that it was independently made, we just, you know, tried to stick to that moral code.
Yeah, girl power. Okay, I think we are almost running out of time, but there is just, a last question that I have. I believe that a lot of you can share my excitement about the movie. So I'm interested. I would like to know if movie will get volume 2. We've seen the North and South America. How about Europe and Asia?
Yes, I am dying to keep this project going and make a Street Heroines 2.0 documentary series. So what we would do is sort of like per season highlight a geographical area, whether it would be Europe or Africa, Asia, go back to Latin America. There's just, you know, the movement's so big. There's so many people out there doing amazing things. Women have reached out to me from around the world, from saying they want to participate. Hey, look at what we're doing over here. Some of my shorts have screened over in India, and there's like a flourishing community of female street artists in India. It's just, I think there's a lot of stories to be told. So we're pitching that to hopefully get funding and do it the right way so it won't turn into another 10-year project. But I think that there's a way to hopefully show a city through the eyes of a female graffiti or street artist, and also just be introduced to the cultural nuances that exist within that society. So I think it would be really interesting to do. So hopefully it'll happen.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I don't have any questions. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to ask Alexandra anything about the movie, perhaps?
And apologies for those who don't speak all those languages or read Slovenian, because I realize there's some people who don't speak Spanish or Portuguese.
That made the ending really mysterious. I had no idea what was going on. I wanted to ask a question about the kind of almost exclusion of kind of monumental muralism, which I guess if you're filming or it's a 10-year project, I mean, in people's minds these days and in some street art festivals' interpretations of what street art is, it has often become these large, commissioned, massive-scale murals. But your film was very much grounded in what Javier Abaca calls like human-scale work, like whether it's graffiti grounded or not, the kind of work you can do without a cherry picker, without, a lift, just, with your body and paint. Did you consider extending the focus to kind of muralism or?
Yeah, I think also too, if you see where these women are now in their careers, for example, Magrela, the Brazilian artist, is now doing like 20-story buildings all over Brazil. Two Fly, she has done some big buildings in Quito, and then Fusca, she doesn't do such huge ones, but she's, they all are, and I think it's because the timing that I could spend with them and the resources, but I also did want to really get into their personal story, and I think too, for example, like Fusca's story where she's just like disenchanted by the festivals and by government entities that are funding these, because really it's like, where's the money coming from for you to do your art? So I wanted to show more of a purist approach where the artists are doing projects that they want to do, that this is their expression, this is how they're showing up in the world. And also with the festival that Two Fly organized in Ecuador, there could have been cherry pickers, but like budget reasons, they had to get the scaffolding and, get that set up, and they couldn't afford the cherry pickers. So I think it was also because they didn't really believe in the messaging of the festival, and they didn't really believe women could actually create monumental murals. So, that's an interesting point. I didn't consciously, exclude it, but I did want to show more of just like their own roots approach.
Thank you for the question. Anybody else, perhaps? Do we have any questions from the online audience? No? Okay. So thank you so much, Alexandra, for coming here, for showing us this excellent movie. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone, for coming and checking it out. And if you want to know more, follow us at Street Heroines on Instagram or streetheroinesfilm.com.
Thank you, Alexandra Henry and Mankica Kranjec. Since we're running out of time, we will just make a shorter snack break now and have a lunch a little later today, because we're continuing at 1:30 here at Comuna in Kino Šiška. So we'll meet you back again soon.